The day my son was born was the most important day of my life, and nothing in the world could have prepared me for the whirlwind of emotions that followed. His tiny hands grasped at the air, so fragile and full of promise, and the moment I held him for the first time, I felt a fierce protectiveness unlike anything I had ever known. I'm Baden Wade, County Sheriff. But in those early hours, all that mattered was being a father. My wife, Emily, and I had been through so much to bring him into this world, and watching him fight to stay healthy made every sleepless night worth it. We live in a quiet neighborhood governed by a homeowners association, something I hadn't thought much about until recently. On paper, the HOA was meant to keep things orderly, a way to ensure neighbors respected one another's property and kept the community looking nice. But as I was about to discover, some people take that control a little too seriously. Our home was supposed to be a sanctuary, a safe place for my family, but I was beginning to realize that not everyone had our best interests at heart. Our baby, Liam, was born prematurely, and the doctors immediately told us he needed to stay in an incubator to regulate his temperature and protect him from infection. The incubator was more than just a piece of equipment. It was his lifeline. We installed a high-tech model in the nursery, carefully monitored day and night. I checked on him constantly, each beep and blink of the machine like a pulse in my own chest. Emily was exhausted but steadfast, always by Liam's side. We were a team, and nothing could shake our resolve. Still, the stress weighed heavily on me. Being sheriff meant I was used to handling emergencies, but this was different. This was personal. Every time I left the house for work, a part of me stayed behind with Liam, wishing I could be everywhere at once. The neighborhood seemed peaceful enough during the day, but I always kept an eye on things. After all, no one knew the weight of responsibility better than I did, and now that responsibility extended far beyond the badge. It was in this fragile balance that I first noticed her Karen, the unofficial ruler of the HOA. She had the kind of presence that made people uncomfortable, a sharp tongue, and an unrelenting sense of authority that she wielded like a weapon. She was known for her constant complaints and her tendency to enforce rules nobody else even remembered. At first, I tried to ignore her. I had bigger battles to fight and didn't want to waste energy on someone so petty. But Karen had a way of inserting herself into everyone's business, and it wasn't long before she came knocking on my door. Her visits were always under the guise of concern, but there was an edge to them that felt more like intimidation. She asked questions about the baby, the equipment in the house, and the noise level. I answered politely, hoping to avoid confrontation, but she pressed on, implying that the incubator might be a disruption or an eyesore. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was my son's health we were talking about, not some petty HOA rule about lawn decorations. Even as I stood my ground, I could see the determination in her eyes. Karen wasn't someone who backed down easily. Her attitude made me uneasy, especially knowing how fragile Liam was. The neighborhood had its quiet routines, but with Karen around, everything felt tense. I knew I had to stay alert, not just as a sheriff but as a father protecting his family. At night, when the world outside fell silent, I sat beside Liam's incubator and thought about what the coming days might bring. I promised myself I would fight tooth and nail to keep my son safe, no matter what obstacles Karen or anyone else tried to throw in our way. This was more than just a neighborhood squabble. It was a battle for my child's future, and I was ready for it. Karen was the kind of woman who seemed to believe the neighborhood belonged to her alone. From the moment she moved in, she made it clear she had a keen interest in every little detail around here. She dressed sharply, with that perfectly manicured look, hair always pinned just right, and a voice that could slice through the thickest tension like a knife. People called her Hoto Karen, and not without reason. She had a reputation for being a stickler for rules, the kind who measured the height of your grass and the shade of your curtains like it was some personal crusade. I first met her shortly after we moved back home with Liam. Emily and I had been settling in, trying to adjust to life with a newborn, when Karen showed up at the front door unannounced. She smiled at me, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She introduced herself with an air of authority that was almost theatrical. "I just wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood," she said, but her tone held an undercurrent of warning. It was the kind of welcome you give when you already expect trouble. Over the next few days, Karen found ways to insert herself into our lives. She appeared during morning walks, always close enough to overhear conversations but never friendly enough to join. She sent emails to the HOA board complaining about the unusual equipment in our house and asked if it was being properly maintained. When I confronted her about it, she said she was just looking out for everyone's best interests. But her eyes told a different story. Her true nature revealed itself in small but significant ways. She criticized the color of the curtains Emily chose for the nursery, saying they didn't match the HOA's aesthetic guidelines. She complained to the neighbors about the noise from the incubator's alarms, even though those alarms were necessary warnings that meant Liam was still fighting. It felt like Karen was deliberately trying to make us uncomfortable, as if our baby's presence in the community was some kind of offense against her personal order. What bothered me most was how fearless she was. Most people would have hesitated before crossing a sheriff, especially one known in the county. But Karen acted like she was untouchable, protected by a shield of HOA bylaws and the support of a few like-minded neighbors. She wielded her self-appointed power like a weapon, eager to remind everyone who was in charge. When I saw her talking to other residents, her tone shifted to something almost condescending, as if she knew a secret that the rest of us didn't. I tried to keep things civil, hoping that my position as sheriff would be enough to keep Karen's behavior in check, but it quickly became clear that she wasn't going to back down. Her need to control was more than just about rules or neighborhood standards. It felt personal. I started to suspect that Karen saw us as outsiders, or worse, a threat to the image she wanted to maintain. She couldn't tolerate anything that disrupted her carefully curated vision of the community, especially a fragile newborn who needed special care. Neighbors started approaching me quietly, sharing their own run-ins with Karen. Some talked about petty disputes over parking spaces or lawn decorations, while others whispered about her habit of showing up uninvited to check on people's compliance with the HOA's endless regulations. It was like she had made it her mission to police every corner of the neighborhood, leaving no one immune from her scrutiny. Despite all this, I kept reminding myself not to let Karen get under my skin. I had a job to do, both as sheriff and as a father, and wasting time on HOA politics wasn't in my plan. But Karen's presence was like a constant shadow hanging over us, a reminder that peace in this neighborhood was fragile at best. Every time she appeared, I felt the weight of her gaze, the unspoken challenge she tossed my way. And then there was the incubator. That fragile machine that kept Liam alive suddenly seemed like a focal point for Karen's wrath. Her disapproval wasn't subtle anymore. I caught her staring at it during one of her neighborhood rounds, her lips pressed tight, her expression unreadable. It was the first time I felt something truly dangerous in her attitude, not just annoyance, but a simmering resentment. Karen had made it clear she would not let anything disrupt her vision of control, but she had no idea who she was dealing with. I was determined to protect my family, no matter what. And Karen, with all her power plays and petty rules, was about to learn that lesson firsthand. The incubator was more than just a machine to me. It was the thin line between life and death for my son, Liam. Born prematurely, he was too small and fragile to regulate his own body temperature, and the doctors insisted the incubator was necessary to keep him stable. Every beep, every flicker of the lights on that device meant the difference between progress and setback. I spent hours watching it, learning its rhythms, understanding how it reacted to his tiny breaths and movements. Emily and I had been warned that the road ahead would be difficult. The incubator was supposed to be temporary, but those days felt stretched by worry and exhaustion. I knew every second mattered. The air inside the incubator was warm and controlled, designed to mimic the safety he missed out on by being born early. It was the closest thing we had to a shield against the harshness of the world outside. I was no stranger to responsibility. My job as sheriff came with its own heavy burdens, but nothing prepared me for the helplessness I felt watching over my son's delicate form. I wanted to fix everything, to keep him safe from harm, but all I could do was watch and wait. The incubator allowed me a small measure of control, a way to know that at least one part of his care was steady and reliable. Every night, I would sit beside Liam's nursery window, eyes fixed on that glowing box. The soft hum of the incubator filled the quiet room. I memorized every alarm sound, every change in the machine's tone, because those were the moments when my world shifted. Sometimes, the alarms meant nothing more than a minor adjustment was needed. Other times, they were warnings that the fragile life inside was struggling. The incubator became a symbol of hope and fear intertwined. It reminded me of the incredible resilience of this tiny human, but also of the precariousness of his existence. I promised myself I would do everything to protect him. I knew that no matter what challenges came my way, this machine, and what it represented, would always be at the center of my fight. I was painfully aware that the neighborhood around us did not always understand the gravity of what we were going through. To most, it was just a piece of equipment, an appliance like any other. But to me and Emily, it was life itself that made every interaction, every comment, and every sideways glance from Karen all the more unbearable. How could someone be so blind to the importance of what this machine meant for our family? When Karen started questioning the incubator, suggesting it was a nuisance or a disruption, it felt like a punch to the gut. I tried to explain, but she brushed off my words with a dismissive wave. Her lack of empathy was as cold as the sterile hospital rooms where Liam had fought so hard to survive. It was as if she wanted to erase the struggles behind the hum of that machine, to reduce Liam's needs to nothing more than an inconvenience. The incubator was not just a machine to me. It was the embodiment of my son's fight to live. Every moment it functioned properly was a victory, every beep a reminder that we still had a chance. Protecting it, ensuring it stayed safe, became my mission as fiercely as any law enforcement duty. I knew that if anything happened to that incubator, it wouldn't just be equipment damaged, it would be a threat to my son's life. And I wasn't going to let that happen. It was a calm afternoon, the kind where the sun slanted gently through the curtains, and the neighborhood seemed almost peaceful. I was downstairs, catching up on some paperwork after a long shift, when Emily's voice called up the stairs, a mixture of confusion and panic threading through it. I dropped everything and ran to the nursery, my heart already pounding faster. When I entered the room, the first thing I noticed was the incubator's lights flickering erratically. The soft hum that usually filled the space was interrupted by an unsettling silence. Liam lay inside, fragile as ever, but something was wrong. Emily stood by the window, her face pale and eyes wide, pointing toward the broken glass on the floor near the incubator. Karen was there too, standing stiffly in the hallway just outside the door, her expression unreadable but her body tense. I recognized the look immediately, one of smugness hiding behind a mask of innocence. She had that cold, calculating air I had seen too many times before. "What the hell happened?" I demanded, moving swiftly to assess the damage. The incubator's front panel was cracked, a jagged line slicing through the plastic like it had been struck hard. The alarms were silent, but I knew the internal sensors were compromised. This was not just a minor accident. Karen shifted uncomfortably, but quickly recovered. "I was just coming by to remind you about the HOA rules on equipment placement," she said, her tone sharp but careful. "I might have bumped into it while trying to adjust the curtains. It was an accident." I looked at her, disbelief and fury boiling beneath my calm exterior. "An accident," I repeated. "You broke the incubator. Do you realize what this means for my son?" Emily's eyes filled with tears, and I could see the fear rising in her chest. Our son's health depended on that machine functioning perfectly, and Karen had just shattered it. It felt like a violation on a level that went far beyond neighborhood disputes. Karen shrugged, as if it was no big deal. "It's just a machine. You can get it fixed." Her words were cold, like she didn't understand the gravity of the situation, or simply didn't care. I felt my jaw clench. I reminded myself I was the sheriff. I had to stay in control, but the rage simmering inside me was hard to contain. "This isn't just about a machine," I said slowly, stepping closer to her. "This is about my son's life." Karen's eyes flicked toward the floor for a moment before snapping back up. "Look, I'm sorry you're upset, but I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. If you want to make a big deal out of this, that's on you." Her defiance was infuriating, but it also showed just how little respect she had for us. I reached for my phone, ready to call for emergency replacement, or at least get the situation documented. Before I could, Karen raised a hand, trying to stop me. "You don't need to make a scene," she said. "I'm sure this can be handled quietly." I shook my head. "No, this can't be handled quietly. You broke a life-saving piece of equipment. You put my baby at risk, and I will not let this go unnoticed." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut through. Karen's smugness faltered just a little, but she quickly masked it with another sharp remark. You think just because you're the sheriff you can bully me. This is an HOA matter. You don't have authority here. That statement was enough to push me over the edge. I stepped forward, lowering my voice but making it clear I was serious. You don't know who you're dealing with, Karen. I'm not just a neighbor. I'm the county sheriff, and I don't take threats lightly. For a moment, her eyes widened, and I saw a flicker of something else, fear. But she masked it quickly with a tight smile. Is that supposed to intimidate me? No, I said. It's to let you know I'm going to make sure this gets resolved. You're going to pay for this damage, and you're going to answer for putting my child's life in danger. Karen didn't respond. Instead, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving a trail of tension behind her. I called the medical equipment company immediately and arranged for an emergency replacement, knowing full well that time was critical. Emily stayed with Liam, holding him close as we waited. The neighbors began to gather, whispering amongst themselves. Some looked sympathetic, others wary. It was clear this incident had shaken more than just our family. Karen's interference had crossed a line, and the whole neighborhood could feel it. That day changed everything. It wasn't just about rules or petty disputes anymore. It was about protecting my family, standing up to someone who had no right to threaten our safety. Karen had made a grave mistake, and I was ready to make sure she understood the consequences. From that moment on, I knew the battle was only beginning. The incubator wasn't just a machine. It was a symbol of what I was fighting for, and I would not let anyone take that away from us. After the incubator was broken, the fragile calm that had surrounded our lives shattered along with the plastic panel. The replacement arrived within hours, but the damage wasn't only physical. Liam's health had taken a hit during those tense moments when the machine was offline, and Emily and I could feel the weight of every second as we watched him struggle to stabilize again. The doctors assured us he would recover, but the fear lingered like a shadow in the corners of our minds. It was a constant reminder that this fight was far from over. The neighborhood, once a place where I could find brief moments of peace after a long day, now felt like a battlefield. Karen's presence grew more aggressive and intrusive after the incident. She began showing up unannounced, her visits less about subtle warnings and more about overt challenges. She questioned every move we made, scrutinizing the equipment in the nursery and even the times Emily stepped outside with Liam. Her tone was sharp and accusatory, as if she believed we were deliberately flaunting the rules she so fervently enforced. I tried to maintain my role as sheriff without letting the situation consume me, but the line between my professional duties and my personal life blurred more with each confrontation. My calls and meetings at the station became shorter, and I found myself distracted, worrying about the fragile life waiting for me at home. Every noise in the house, every unexpected sound from Liam's room, sent a jolt of anxiety through me. The incubator, once a symbol of hope, now felt like a fragile shield we had to defend at all costs. Emily bore much of the emotional burden. She was exhausted, physically and mentally, but she never wavered in her dedication. Watching her care for Liam, her gentle hands soothing him during moments of distress, was both inspiring and heartbreaking. I could see the toll the constant stress was taking on her, but she never complained. Together, we tried to create a bubble of safety around our son, but Karen was relentless in piercing it. Neighbors who once exchanged polite nods now avoided eye contact, unsure where their loyalties should lie. Some whispered about Karen's behavior, while others seemed afraid to get involved. The HOA board, which had previously been a background presence, suddenly became a source of tension. Meetings were filled with complaints and accusations, with Karen leading the charge against us. It felt like the entire community was watching, waiting to see how far this conflict would go. The personal stakes became clear in ways I hadn't anticipated. This was no longer just about protecting Liam's health or keeping the peace at home. It was about standing up for my family's right to live without fear or harassment. As sheriff, I was accustomed to dealing with threats and danger, but this was different. This threat was invasive, personal, and relentless. It challenged not only my authority but my ability to keep my family safe. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, I found myself sitting beside Liam's incubator, the soft glow of the machine illuminating his peaceful face. I promised him silently that no matter what happened, I would protect him. That promise gave me strength. It reminded me why I couldn't let Karen's actions go unanswered. I owed it to Emily, to Liam, and to myself. The community's support began to trickle in quietly. A few neighbors approached with cautious sympathy, offering help or simply a listening ear. Their kindness was a balm in the midst of chaos, but it also highlighted how isolated we had become in this fight. Karen's influence was strong, and it was clear she wasn't just a single adversary but a symbol of a larger battle within the neighborhood. Despite the mounting pressure, I remained focused. I was determined to use every tool at my disposal to hold Karen accountable. This wasn't just a legal matter, it was a fight for justice and for the dignity of my family. The broken incubator had become a catalyst, igniting a fire within me that no amount of harassment could extinguish. In the days that followed, I prepared myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. Karen had underestimated me, and she would soon learn that being the sheriff meant more than carrying a badge. It meant standing up when it mattered most, especially when the safety of those you love is on the line. And I was ready. The day I decided to confront Karen was the day I realized this wasn't going to be a simple HOA dispute. It had spiraled far beyond that. I arranged to meet with the HOA board at the community center, a place that usually buzzed with harmless chatter about landscaping and neighborhood events. Today, it felt heavy with tension, every face shadowed with uncertainty. I walked in with Emily by my side, our determination unspoken but palpable. Karen was already there, seated near the front, her posture rigid, eyes sharp and scanning the room as if daring anyone to challenge her. She had that same cold smile, the one that told me she thought she already won. The board members looked uneasy, caught between their roles and the escalating conflict. I took a deep breath and addressed the room, speaking clearly and firmly. I'm here to talk about what happened with the incubator and the ongoing harassment my family has faced, I said. It's no secret that my son's health was put at risk. I want to make sure that stops now. There was a murmur of agreement from some neighbors, but Karen interrupted, her voice dripping with condescension. This is an HOA matter. Personal feelings shouldn't interfere with community rules. You're making this into something it isn't. That's when I decided it was time to make my position clear. Karen, I said, locking eyes with her, you seem to think this is just a neighborhood disagreement, but you don't know the whole story. I'm not just another resident. I'm the county sheriff. The room went quiet. All eyes turned to me, then to Karen. Her confident mask faltered for the briefest moment before she recovered, but I could see the flicker of uncertainty in her gaze. The power dynamic shifted instantly. The woman who had seemed so untouchable was suddenly on the defensive. I continued. I'm responsible for upholding the law in this county. That means protecting my family and ensuring justice is served. What you did was reckless and dangerous. It endangered a child's life. That's not something I can overlook. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. She glanced at the board members, perhaps searching for an ally, but I could tell many were now reconsidering their stance. The room's energy had changed. It was no longer just about rules and regulations, but about accountability and respect. One of the board members cleared their throat and spoke quietly. Maybe we should review the evidence before jumping to conclusions. I nodded. I've documented everything, the broken incubator, the medical reports, the communications with Karen. This isn't about personal grudges. It's about responsibility. Karen finally spoke, her tone less assured. I didn't mean to cause harm, it was an accident. I looked at her calmly. Intent doesn't erase consequences. You need to make this right. For the first time, Karen's usual bravado cracked. I could see she understood the severity of the situation. Being confronted by the sheriff himself meant this wasn't just about HOA bylaws anymore. There would be real consequences. As the meeting progressed, I outlined the steps we needed to take to ensure my family's safety and to repair the damage done. It was clear that Karen would face restrictions and possible fines for her actions. More importantly, she had to understand that the community would not tolerate threats against any of its members, especially not a newborn. After the meeting, Karen approached me quietly. Her tone was subdued, almost wary. I didn't realize who you were before. Maybe I was wrong about how to handle things. I met her gaze steadily. This isn't about power or authority, Karen. It's about doing what's right. For Liam, for my family, for this community. She nodded slowly and stepped back. The fight drained from her for now. I knew this wouldn't be the end of it, but for the moment, the message was clear. I wasn't just a neighbor, I was the sheriff. And I was not going to let anyone threaten my family's safety. Walking out of that room with Emily, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The confrontation had been necessary, and it had changed everything. Karen had seen the truth, and the neighborhood had seen what I was willing to do to protect what mattered most. From that day forward, the tone of the neighborhood shifted. People began to respect the boundaries and the seriousness of the situation. And for me, it was a reminder that sometimes you have to step into the light and show who you really are to protect the ones you love. The days following the meeting were tense but purposeful. Karen's usual boldness was tempered by the knowledge that I was not just a disgruntled neighbor but the county sheriff. She kept her distance, her sharp comments reduced to quiet mutters behind closed doors. It felt like the neighborhood was holding its breath, waiting to see how things would unfold. I made sure the replacement incubator was installed promptly and monitored closely. Liam's health gradually improved, each stable reading a small victory that brought relief to Emily and me. The medical team was supportive and cautious, understanding the delicate balance we were navigating. Every day I spent at home felt like a battle won, but I knew the fight wasn't only against illness, it was against the hostility that had invaded our sanctuary. The HOA board called a special session to address the incident formally. I attended, prepared with all the documentation, photos of the broken incubator, medical reports, and records of Karen's harassment. The room was filled with familiar faces, some sympathetic, others conflicted. Karen sat quietly, the defiance in her eyes replaced by a resigned acceptance. I presented the evidence clearly and calmly, emphasizing the seriousness of what had happened. "This is about more than just a broken piece of equipment," I said. "It's about respect, safety, and accountability. My family's well-being was endangered. We must ensure this never happens again." The board members listened attentively, and after a thorough discussion, they voted unanimously to impose sanctions on Karen. She would face a substantial fine, be required to attend conflict resolution meetings, and adhere to strict guidelines limiting her involvement in other residents' affairs. The decision was firm but fair, reflecting the community's need to heal and move forward. Karen's reaction was muted. She avoided confrontation and refrained from further interference. It was clear the message had been delivered, and her role as the neighborhood's self-appointed enforcer had been curtailed. For the first time since this ordeal began, peace started to return. Neighbors began to reach out, offering support and understanding. Some shared their own frustrations with Karen's overbearing nature, while others simply wanted to express empathy for what my family had endured. The community that had once felt fractured slowly began to rebuild its sense of unity. I was grateful for their kindness, knowing that no one should have to face such challenges alone. Emily and I found strength in each other and in the progress Liam was making. Watching our son grow stronger every day was the greatest reward, a testament to resilience and hope. The incubator, once a symbol of crisis, became a reminder of the fight we had won together. In the quiet moments, I reflected on the journey. Being sheriff had taught me about justice and responsibility, but this experience deepened my understanding of what it meant to protect. It wasn't just about enforcing laws. It was about standing up for those who couldn't defend themselves, about using every ounce of strength to shield the vulnerable. Karen's actions had tested me in ways I hadn't expected. She underestimated the lengths I would go to keep my family safe. Her attempts to control and intimidate only strengthened my resolve. I realized that true authority comes not from fear or power, but from compassion and commitment. The neighborhood, too, learned valuable lessons. The incident sparked conversations about respect, boundaries, and the importance of community support. We started working together more, fostering an environment where everyone felt safe and valued. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. As Liam finally came home from the hospital, free of the incubator and thriving, I felt a profound sense of relief and gratitude. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had brought us closer and reminded me why I chose this path: to protect, to serve, and to fight for what matters most. The ordeal with Karen was a chapter we closed, but its lessons stayed with us. I remained vigilant, knowing that challenges would come, but confident in our ability to face them together. My family was my priority, and nothing would threaten that again. Looking back, I understood that the broken incubator was more than an accident. It was a catalyst that revealed strength, courage, and the power of standing up for those you love. It was a story I would carry with me, always a story of justice, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between a father and his son. In the quiet that followed all the chaos, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. The broken incubator was more than just an accident. It was a test of my resolve as a father and as a sheriff. Protecting Liam meant standing up not only to threats from outside, but to the forces that tried to undermine our family's safety from within our own community. I learned that true strength isn't just about authority or power, but about fighting for those you love with every part of your being. Karen's actions showed me how easily fear and control can breed conflict, but they also revealed the importance of compassion and justice. Our neighborhood was far from perfect, but this experience sparked a change. People began to look out for each other in ways they hadn't before, and that gave me hope. As I hold Liam now, watching him grow stronger every day, I know this fight was worth it. No matter what challenges lie ahead, I am ready. Because being his father and the sheriff means protecting what matters most with courage, with patience, and with an unshakable commitment.